Hello everyone, happy 4th of July. My name is Sabin Orcan, I'm the publisher of Music Romania. It is an honor for me to host this Independence Day Forum. The next day after the big party for 4th of July hosted by the Honorable Adrian Zuckerman, Ambassador of the United States to Romania from 2019 to 2021, and Dr. Nawaf Salameh, founding chairman of Alexandrion Group. For all of you that don't know yet, I have to tell you that both of them are some of the most passionate friends of Romania. And I say that because Mr. Zuckerman was born here and still feels like one of us. And Mr. Nawaf, which was an immigrant to Romania, is now one of the first serious Romanian investors in the United States. So before we start our debate today, let me ask them what they felt that the relationship between the United States and Romania is so important, and what can do better to benefit us all. Mr. Ambassador.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here. Happy 4th of July, everybody. Nawaf, thank you very much for hosting not just this forum, but our celebration yesterday at this magnificent hotel in Sinaia that Alexandrion developed. The United States is Romania's best friend. Romania, as everybody knows, is one of the defenders of the eastern flank of Europe against Russian aggression. Along with Poland, it forms an axis. It's the first line of defense against Russian aggression and aggression from other countries as well. And it also forms an economic linchpin for Europe, Southern Europe, as well as various areas in Asia. One of the most important keys to European security is economic security as well as military national security. You cannot have military national security without economic security and economic well-being. I think Romania has a brilliant future ahead of it. I am confident that it will continue to grow and develop in an economic sound fashion. And as you will hear more from our panelists today, the economic plans for Romania as well as the national security plans for Romania and the region will be discussed in more detail. And I'm very, very optimistic about the future. Thank you so much for having me here.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Nawaf.
Happy 4th of July for everybody. Thank you very much. I'm glad because I'm here in my home and in this hall it is first time. Well done, the team here in Alexandrion Experience. I think I need hours to explain what it is very important for US and for us in Romania to have a strong relationship economic, because today I think the war between, let's say, all the world and Russia is economic, and they play economic through using the food, using the cereal, using the gas, using the petrol, everything. It is economic. Now, like investor, I am Romania immigrant last 41 years. And last almost 10 years, I'm investor in United States of America. I think today to bring our colleague, our friend from America to come to invest in Romania, we need to prepare Romania. We need to prepare the rules in Romania to accept their mentality, because their mentality it's much with Poland, much with Czechia, with Slovenia, Slovakia, with UK, with German, with every country in Europe except Romania. Here in Romania, I think we need seriously to move on and quickly to change some, let's say, to upgrade our law, because one of the simple law in America, everybody, then when they have two companies, they created holding. In Romania, it's forbidden to have holding. So that means even our friend, they want to come to Romania, they cannot come to do business here in Romania. This is very simple. Again, they want to come here. A lot of companies show interest to come here. But we need here to upgrade our law and business law and rules to make our friend from America to come to Romania. Because secondly, and here is very important, and I want to send message to all my colleagues in Romania. If you are an investor in US, you can from US deal globally, and you are going to have huge support from the central government of US, and every country where exists embassy, they will support you like investor. This is very important for us. When we go to invest in US, we are not investing just in US. We can, from US, to become a global player. When I take decision to go US, because I want to be strong global player. And I found only country from 248 countries, all the world, they can support that, United States of America. None of the rest of the countries I have a relationship, either I'm live less 41 years, Romania example like country, they can't support me, and the country I'm exist. United States of America, my business, they can support me globally. So everybody from when you want to go to invest in US, put him in mind, he can play a global player from America globally.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador, for your service, not only to the United States, also to Romania. Thank you, Mr. Nawaf, for hosting this, this great event in your beautiful hotel here in Sinaia. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. It's a pleasure for Nawaf and I to host this event and hear from the guests that you will be speaking with. It's very important for people to understand the issues surrounding Romania, surrounding the United States, and how the bilateral relationship can be improved and move forward. Thank you very much, Sabi.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. So, allow me to introduce the speakers from the first part of our debate. Mr. Răzvan Mustață, he's a Dean of the Faculty of Economics at Babeș-Bolyai University in Cluj-Napoca. Mr. Mark Beacom, he's the CEO of Black Sea Oil and Gas, the first company that started to extract natural gas from the Black Sea. And also from the United States is Mr. Craig Martin, co-chair of DLA Piper, one of the largest law firms in the world. I hope, yeah, he is in connection with us. How are you doing? What is hour in the United States?
It is 3:46 a.m. Nice to be with you.
I'm sorry for that, Mr. Martin. So I hope we will have a live discussion. I have some questions, but I want to have a understanding of the challenges to the global economy. This is the topic of our first debate, and I have a question for you all. What do you think is the greatest challenge to global economy right now, and how do you think Romania should face it? Mr. Mustață, please.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for inviting me here. I think that we have at the global level, we have from economic point of view, because we could speak about the geopolitics, but from economic point of view, the main challenge is related to the part of inflation. We know that the inflation is an economic phenomenon that is very challenging with different parts and interference with different sectors. If we are going to make some comparison with the stock exchange, is something similar. If something very small is happened within the public area or within decision makers or something like this, you're going to see a reaction on the stock market. And the same thing is with the inflation. So considering the fact that we have the war in Ukraine, we have all the let's say, the tension between US and China, and all the things related to the delivery of goods and everything in a global economy, the inflation from economic point of view, it's a major challenge for the economy. Right now, we could say that it's a better sign all over the world, because within the United States, we get the decrease of the rate of inflation, which means that, all right, we are expecting the same things with another economy, in particular in Romania and European Union. But if we are not, I don't know, challenge this phenomenon in a proper manner, it's possible to get up with the inflation, and we get a lot of consequences from economic point of view. This is, from my perspective, the main challenge.
Thank you, Professor Mustață. Mr. Bicom. Now, we'll talking a bit about the energy sector, which is going through great changes right now. But what is the biggest challenge for the global economy?
There's so many to choose from, isn't there? So, because my focus is energy, I see the world this way. So I see it slightly different. We have this clearly an existential threat of global warming and what's it's creating for the entire planet. And so there's this real effort to get into a transition economy, move away from fossil fuels. And listen, I'm a fossil fuel guy. We just developed the first gas field in the Romania Black Sea in over 30 years. But I'm fully aware that we need to move from fossil fuels for the benefit of the planet into something that is sustainable. At the same time, we have an energy security threat because of what's happened in the Ukraine, and we saw economies move heaven and earth to try and store up their energy, because if you don't have energy coming into your country, the whole thing collapses. So it's interesting for Romania, because both of these things come together in a positive way, because Romania can offer the world a solution that takes care of both of these things. First of all, in the transition period, I fully believe we need natural gas. We're not going to be able to make up of the trillions of kilowatt hours of energy we're going to need overnight, but certainly gas can take care of that while we transition. Romania is sitting there with an abundance of gas. The Black Sea has 150 billion cubic meters behind pipe, and so it's there to be developed, and so very few countries have that ability to turn on the tap and provide the natural gas it needs for itself, and even provide a hungry Western European market that's desperate for gas and bring in all sorts of value to the economy. And at the same time, the transition looks very interesting. In particular, offshore wind. Again, I'm a Black Sea person. They're talking 76 gigawatts of potential power in the Black Sea. So Romania has the near-term and the long-term solution that also can benefit the economy. Only Romania has this compared to many other countries that are starving for this benefit. The bad news is, it's very difficult to execute. We had a horrendous time bringing our Black Sea development to fruition. And we'll talk later about our next project, which is wind. We're concerned we're going to have this similar resistance to being able to get development going. So I think energy is the problem, security and transition, and Romania is sitting in a very positive position.
We'll get back to that, to the energy, what the problems is facing. But just let's go to Mr. Martin. And Mr. Martin, the same question. What do you think are the greatest challenges to the global economy right now?
Thank you for having me, and hopefully you can hear me all right. I think Mark has hit on something, which is the transition, and it's not just in the context of energy and energy security. That's obviously one issue, but I think that in our generation, what we're going to see in the coming years is the more emergence of smaller and growing countries that will compete with some of the existing established countries, and the way in which our global economy integrates and transition. I think that that is a potential great challenge and a challenge for all of us to seek to integrate and work together in a peaceful way rather than in a way of conflict. Unfortunately, there are still parts of the world that are under conflict. We all know where many of those places are. And I think I think your question was implicit in that is, where does Romania want to fit into that? And I think that as Romania comes out of its past being under what we call the Iron Curtain and emerges as a center of Europe, as Europe shifts eastward, part of what Romania will need to do is figure out how it wants to fit in to the global economy and how it wants to integrate and be part of that transition, as Mark has suggested, as possible.
I have one more question because you opened this discussion. I think you both mentioned it. In Europe here, we are more concerned right now with the Russian threat. You in the United States, on the other hand, are more worried about a confrontation with China, right? I mean, in economic terms, we are concerned about energy, about the Russian gas in Europe, but you are more concerned about the confrontation with China. Both countries are challenging the West, right? The Western world. How this confrontation will shape our economy in the future? What do you think, Mr. Martin?
Yeah, I think the current administration likes to refer to their interaction with China as a competition rather than a confrontation. I think that the trade wars that we had maybe 5 years ago had a significant impact. And as Xi Jinping goes into his third term and maybe will exist beyond that, I think there's a realization that in many areas there's going to be a fair amount of competition. And what I think you've already seen some of is that in the global economy, both China and the United States are putting to other countries in the developing world a choice. Do you want to be part of the Western US world, or do you want to be part of the China world? You see that in some of the telecommunications issues. You see that in some other issues. Russia, I think, is still uncertain. Obviously, right now, the world is aligned against them to help Ukraine. But they obviously have tremendous resources that are needed in the world. So I think it will be difficult to completely exclude them. And it will be interesting to see as hopefully the war comes to an end, what happens with leadership there, how they will fit back into the world. And I think there will be an effort because of their size and their resources for the world to determine a way for them to fit back into the global economy.
Thank you. I will get back to Mark about the energy war here in the region, but I want to go back to Professor Mustață. We have a lot of resources in Romania, not only natural gas, but I can give an example. Last night I found out from Mr. Nawaf that we have here in Romania one thing that is essential to make whiskey, and they are imported. The Scotian people are imported it from here. Then we have a lot of natural resources, rare metals and stuff like that. We don't use it at the maximum value. Isn't this a solution to inflation, debt, and some other things of the economy, some other problems of the Romanian economy right now?
Yeah, of course. About what Mark mentioned, that part of resources as we have it within the Black Sea represent or could represent or could be transformed into a game changer for the Romanian economy. We have a lot of resources here in Romania. Resources means natural resources as gas in the Black Sea, or opportunities as what could represent the Danube River, for example, or other opportunities here in Romania. And if we are taking care of all of this in the proper manner, we could transform everything in a game changer for our economy. And I don't know, something is difficult for me or my colleagues to understand why the policymakers and decisions makers doesn't realize that if we take these resources and change it in the proper manner in game changer, as I mentioned, right, this could change our status on the global economy. We could become a global player on the market. This war in Ukraine, represent a strong challenge for us because it's near our borders, almost near our borders. But we could transform this situation in an opportunity for Romania. Maybe you know that it's something common in our history, that we started in 1949 to wait for the United States or American citizens to come here in Romania. Right, they are here.
And liberate us.
Yeah, they are here, all right, and we are in a position very, very positive, if I could say this, for our country. So it's important to have these resources, to use it in our interest, from economic interest, and in this condition, it's possible to not be so connected with the European economy. What I want to mention by this, we know that Romanian economy is a small and open economy, but it's very connected with the Western European economy. So what's happened within the Western European economy, it's possible with a delay of few months or something like this to happen at another level within Romanian economy. It's about the contagions effects between the national economy or regional economies. So when something is happened within a big economy or major economies in the European Union, it's sure that will happen in Romanian economy. At, of course, a different level, but if you are going to use these opportunities in a favor of our economy, it's possible to not get the same effect, or to be sure that what's happened within these economies will happen in our economy. So it's very important for us to use it in a proper manner and to use this opportunity with the energy crisis and everything in Europe and all over the world.
Thank you. Mr. Bickham, we have this paradoxical situation. We want, all the Western states are committed to reducing the greenhouse and to combat climate change, you mentioned it. So we want cleaner energy, but then Romania is one of the countries, I think, after Netherlands, with the country with the largest natural gas reserve, not only offshore, but also onshore. We're not using it at the maximum capacity. What we need, is the policymakers, that's Professor Mustață mentioned it, is the law, is that we are not ready for this challenge, we don't understand this is a window of opportunity, that we have to use it. What is it?
Okay, well, I could really get in trouble here, so I'm going to be a little careful. There is a reality of the resistance. You know, we've been at the development of our Black Sea discovery, trying to bring it online for 12 years, which is a horrendously long period of time, when clearly it was needed by the country. Romania imports gas. You know, why not buy it from your own supplier, and royalties and taxes go to Romania rather than to some foreign country, so it makes all the sense in the world. And what we found going through our development was there wasn't any overt resistance. In fact, there was always verbal support for the development of the Black Sea. And what we found in practice was the local authorities tended to be very good. If they had a problem, they told us we had a problem, and we had to work with them to make sure we accommodated their needs. The central authorities were a little more opaque, and I have never been able to understand what is the issue. Why, when we go forward to try and get something done, there's some sort of aggression or some sort of blockage, things aren't going to get done, and it's clear they're deliberately being stalled. And so you can speculate, and I don't have the answer, but you can speculate. You say, well, it's geopolitical, it's the Russians. It's obviously they have a vested interest. So maybe they have a part to play in it. Or it's not geopolitical, but it's political. One politician was trying to fight with another one and is using the blockage to try and undermine this other's position, and that takes place in an area that you never get visibility on. So it could be geopolitical, it could be political, it could be opportunistic. Somebody feels if I'm a gatekeeper and get in the way, I can enrich myself some way. They found with us that never works, but it can be opportunistic. And it could be ideological. It could be ideological and we did run into that there is a natural resistance when a foreign company is coming in to exploit the resources. They're finite. Once they're taken, they're gone forever. And so there's some political factions who do not want foreign companies to come in. There's some political factions do not want it to be anything other than state control. So I think we faced a gambit of all of those things, but they were absolutely real.
Let me ask you this, Mr. Beacon, because I know this sector pretty well. What are the total taxes that your company is paying to the Romanian state? What is the percentage? Because I know it's very high.
Yeah, so there's a number of levels of taxation. So it starts off the royalties, 13% off the top. Everyone pays this corporation tax, 16%. And then we have an additional windfall profits tax, they call it, a windfall profits tax that was introduced just before we were going to take FID, just before we did take FID in a final investment decision in 2019. And the idea of the windfall profits tax was that, if the company is making a windfall, it should be taken by the state.
So the state is getting a lot of money from you. What is the problem?
Yeah, and it's based on pricing, which is actually kind of a progressive tax in a positive way. But the negative part of, if I just go into the tax itself, philosophically, the negative part of it is it's actually not a windfall profits tax. Instead they said, look, what we're going to do is we're going to introduce this new tax. You are going to get you risked $500 million, fully risked. You're going to get your money back. You're going to pay all the royalties and the CIT, of course, but on this windfall tax, you're going to get your money back. You're going to get a return that's normal. We're going to see a pot of money left. Let's call it a windfall. Let's agree how we're going to split it. But the way the tax was introduced is on day one. Day one, we pay a big chunk of money in this tax. It's not a windfall tax. It's right from day one. So we may never recover our investment if things go wrong. If the CapEx shoots up, the prices go down, the reservoirs shut down. I mean, there's a possibility, theoretically, that you'll never get your money back. And yet you paid a huge proportion in windfall tax. And this is it's more the philosophical nature of the tax rather than the quantity of the tax itself that's caused such grief in developing the Black Sea.
Thank you. I will get back to Mr. Martin. Mr. Martin, the most recent ranking of foreign investments in Romania look like this. It's Germany with 15 billion euros, is Austria with 10 billion euros, is France with 9 billion euros, and Italy with 7 billion. And then is the United States with 7.8 billion euros. So we have 4 countries that don't have even half of the USA GDP. They are investing more in Romania, are closer to us, are our European allies. What do you think the Romanian authorities should do in order to boost the American investments here?
Well, obviously that's a big question, but I can give you some thoughts based on some of my experience. The capital in the United States, there's a lot of competition for it, and the investors that control it have rigorous guidelines as to how they invest their money and the type of return that they expect. And so as they're looking around the world for places to invest, if they're going to be taking high risk, they expect high return. And they oftentimes want to stay away from places that have extraordinary risk or risks that are outside the control of a typical investor. So when you have situations where government action is unpredictable, enforcement rights in the courts is unpredictable, and there's not certainty as to how investors and businesses will be treated, I think it's part of the process that has U.S. investors sending capital perhaps to other areas that don't have those same issues. So anything that could be done to provide more certainty in the business environment, I think would be a positive step towards encouraging U.S. investors to consider Romania as a place they might wish to invest.
Thank you. Professor Mustaza, I have a question for you. You spoke about the inflation, but some other economists are talking about the problem of the government debt. Some other are talking about lack of foreign investments or more foreign investments, but some others are talking about the lack of performance of more than 1,000. I think there are 1,200 state companies in Romania. Some of them, as Mark is nodding, some of them are in the energy sector. I mean, the largest energy providers in Romania are state-owned, fully owned. Some of them are listed on the market, but also the state controls the largest stake. And also we have probably 1,000 that are not profitable. Some of them are in sensitive areas, like I told you, like the salt. Nobody knows, but the salt is very valuable, and we have a lot of salt in Romania, and there is a state company in charge of that. Never been privatized, nobody wanted to list it on the market and so on. So what do you think about that?
Here are two main aspects or two main perspectives. It's one political one, and I'm not specialist in politics. But as a simple citizen of Romania, I think that the state should be involved on a lower manner within the economy. It's something basic, right, to keep the economy free in order to work based on its own principles, because it's something sustainable on a medium or long term. And the other perspective is the economic perspective. Here is very simple. If it's not profitable, all right, change it. We don't say that, all right, it's necessary to, I don't know, to close these companies, all right? But make some restructurations, make some, I don't know, mergers, or put it together in something, or selling, all right? Keep some percentage of control or something like this in this, or interest percentage in these companies, but selling and give it to the private property investors and to make it profitable. Because if we are going to keep this amount of companies which are not profitable for the Romanian economy, right? You are not allowed to be amazed the fact that you get inflations or something like this at some high level, higher than a normal one, okay, in normal condition. So these kind of companies, in the condition in which they are not profitable, of course, influence the part of inflation, because they generate cost, they generate a lot of expenses, but not any kind of revenues, and based on this, we could increase, I don't know, the level of stability, decrease the level of stability of Romanian economy. So you need to make something with this. It's very simple. It's something basic in economy. You are not allowed to keep it and just keep it. All right, doesn't matter. If you have an I don't know, maybe a national security interest, all right, say it in this manner, all right, and we understand it. But how many companies could be from the part or within the group of national security interest? All right, not so many.
One more question. You have some estimations about the economic growth, inflation, debt until the end of this year. What are the numbers?
We are running right now from 2 years ahead, running on research project, which is a very nice product from our side, which is called Romanian Economic Monitor. The main objective of this platform, which is a free one, is to monitorize everything within the Romanian economy and make some predictions. And what's very funny, because in research we need to have a part of funny things, right? What is very funny that is the fact that our predictions are much more closer to the European Union ones in comparison with our government's predictions. And based on this, we know that
You mean the government is always more optimistic than the European Union?
Yeah. We know that, for example, for inflation, we were on a plateau of evolutions, and we started decrease in the level of inflation rate. And based on our estimation, it's possible to have at the end of the year an inflation rate with 7 and something. And based on our prediction, it's expected to the end of 2024 to get an inflation rate with 4 and something. Right, 4.5 or something like this. And also in terms of economic growth, translated or using the GDP as main factors, we had a prediction or an estimation for 2.5% of increase this year, but considering an update of factors or main, factors on the global economy and Romanian economy, we reshape the estimation at 3% this year. And if we are thinking about the level of growth of GDP before the pandemic time, in 2019, if I'm not wrong, the growth of the GDP was 3.9. And if we are going to get in 2033 an increase of 3%, which is, of course, is lower than the initial provisions and perspectives, but if we keep it in this part, it's a good thing because it's a positive one, and it's closer to the fact that the situation prior to the pandemic time. We'll see what's happened. We know that we have the war in Ukraine, we have all the tension at the global level, and also we have an election year here in Romania, which based on our behavior during the time, during the history after 1990, we know that the election years are difficult from economy.
Thank you, Professor. Mr. Bikram, you mentioned another project for wind energy in the Black Sea. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, I'd love to. Thank you for the plug. We had a press release yesterday, and as I mentioned, we've built this this gas project. We built all of this infrastructure offshore, and it brings the infrastructure to the onshore in Vadu. And this infrastructure isn't just available for the reservoirs that we're producing, the gas reservoirs we're producing. It actually is leveraging, highly leveraging, to use for renewable projects. And so offshore wind, which, you know, as I said, in Romania, there's the experts say maybe there's 76 gigawatts of power. Just to put that in perspective, Romania consumes, I think it's around 11 gigawatts of power. So it's a big number. And so what we see is that our infrastructure allows us to find the solution for bringing the power from offshore all the way across the coast into the lands and connect to Transelectrica. Because that, it doesn't sound like a big deal. You could just bring cables from offshore to tie into Transelectrica, but you know, there's the biosphere, there's Natura 2000 you got to worry about, there's the military zones, both onshore and offshore, there's tourist areas, there's fishing rights, there's harbors, there's anchorages, there's resistance in the communities because maybe they don't want to bring in this infrastructure. And we find out that this huge coast that Romania has gets very, very, very small. There's very few opportunities to find a way to bring, whether it's gas pipeline infrastructure or power cable infrastructure through. Well, we've, after all of our pain, you know, we have our corridor. We have our corridor for our gas project. And so it's very easy. We've already gone through all of the environmental, the cultural, the military, all of that effort, and our community's on board. So, and we own the lands. We've already addressed this one very critical issue of how you bring the power home. And so we press release that we've started the permitting process to do 3 gigawatts of power, the power corridor itself. And we're starting that even though there is yet to have an offshore wind law passed through Parliament. So nobody can actually start offshore wind development. There's no way to get a concession offshore. But, you know, we felt, look, we can be proactively getting the one solution, a part of the puzzle in place, because it's going to be needed in order to address getting power from the wind farms.
How big the investment will be, approximately?
Well, if we're going to ramp up from 3 gigawatts of the power corridor to actually being also the developer of the offshore wind farms, which we don't have to be. You know, we could do all 3 gigawatts, or we could co-invest, or we could just be the supplier. Carlyle is our 90% shareholder, and 3 gigawatts of tire development would be $6 to $9 billion. Very few companies can write that kind of check. But thankfully, Carlyle's in a position where if they could find that the investment makes sense, and actually what Craig said earlier, Carlyle's in that exact position that was mentioned. It invests in 5 continents on a spectrum of ideas, and it looks at each country, and each country has to stand on its own to be competitive against another investment. So right now, you know, things look promising for this 3 gigawatts, and my hope is that you know, Carlyle would be full in for the entire investment, but that depends on what comes out of the offshore law, what fiscal regime, what problems might have, how risky is the investment. But they certainly are in a position to be able to write the check if they found this to be the right investment for the country, for themselves and for the country, of course.
That's a very great news.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Mr. Martin, so I will let you have the final word about that. It's not about love in international relationship. Even though we love the Americans, we waited for them for 50 or more years, like Professor Mustafa already mentioned. But it's also about laws, about politics. So I will ask you just to follow your answer earlier. What exactly do you think it should happen in the next couple of years to bring more American investment here, besides getting rid of bureaucracy or having a holding law like Mr. Nawaf asked? What do you think?
Well, first off, exciting to hear about Carlyle potentially doing a wind project in Romania. That would be very exciting. They're a great company. I think one thing that is useful to understand is that Americans have a unique characteristic in that we're often very optimistic and willing to take risk if we think we can succeed on business and make a difference in the world. And I think Romania has a lot to offer to many Americans, and many of the people that we've talked to are in America are excited about Romania, willing to invest in Romania. But the environment remains somewhat uncertain. Mark's comments at the beginning were very interesting that, as he developed over 12 years a project, there were many times when he was uncertain as to what the problem was. And that type of uncertainty is really what puts at risk Americans' willingness to invest. And so anything that can be done to provide more certainty and more clarity on if external investors invest in Romania, how they can expect to be treated and what kind of return that they can make would be very positive. The changing of taxes at any moment, the changing of a law regarding a particular industry for an unknown reason, those are the types of things I think that scare Western investors and potentially make them evaluate investments in other regions rather than Romania.
Thank you very much. If you want to say one more word, I think we touched some big issue here, not only about energy, about policymakers and about the risk not to understand that we have a lot of resources, but we have to use it responsibly. Mr. Beacom?
Sure. I would like to close out and just reiterate that Romania is sitting in an amazing position. The opportunities are there, whether it's near term to try and flood the market with gas, bring gas into Western Europe. It's desperate for gas during this transition and energy security problem. And honestly, if Romania had been able to develop the Black Sea, that gas that's sitting there ready to be developed, had developed it in front of what's happened in Ukraine and been able to be a big exporter of gas into Europe, I can tell you, the Romanian energy minister walking to Brussels would get a red carpet. And they'd be saying, what can we do for you? And he'd say, Schengen, fixed. So okay. It's an opportunity that was lost, but that's near term. We still have the longer term, and I think offshore wind is well, I've pointed out, is a huge potential. And I hope that this opportunity is realized.
Thank you. Professor Mustafa, besides criticizing the government, which are our habit from hundreds of years, is there anything we can do? I mean, media, academia, or the citizens about it?
Yeah. With few words, let's continue to do what we are doing from academia point of view. Let's contribute to the development with the research and data and a fair and right point of view and information for decision makers. And generally speaking, based on the data on the macroeconomics data, we as an national economy are in a good position. And my recommendation is let's now blow up in the next period, right?
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Martin, Mr. Bickham, Professor Mostatse. Here we are closing our first part of the debate. We will have a break and then we will get back to our debate, and we will speak about security at the Black Sea. But let me tell you this, you can watch this on newsweek.ro, on our Facebook page, and also we will put a translated version of it, because I think some very interesting things were said here and are very important for us to understand how to make of this friendship with the United States a very profitable one for our country. Thank you so much. We'll take a break and then we'll be back.
Found me now.
Black Sea. Here with us is the Honorable Adrian, former Minister of Foreign Affairs, manager of the National Library of Romania, and Mr. George Scutaru, CEO of New Strategy Center think tank, former National Security Advisor to the Romanian President.
Good afternoon.
And also with us from the United States is the Honorable Ulrich Brechbuhl, former Counselor of the Department of State and Acting Undersecretary for Public Diplomacy. I hope we have the link.
We do, absolutely. It's a pleasure to be there and join.
Thank you, thank you. I know it's very late for you there, but I hope this discussion will be an occasion to say some interesting thing about the Romanian-American relationship. We are celebrating here the 4th of July. First of all, I will start with Professor Cioroianu, who is also an accomplished historian, and I will ask him to explain us a little bit how the Black Sea came to be such an important place, not only for our security, but also for the security of all the Western world.
Thank you very much, Sabin Orkan. A pleasure to see you, Ambassador Zuckerman, Mr. Nawaf, Salameh. Good afternoon to all of you. Listen, in my opinion, Black Sea was, just imagine that between the 16th century and the 20th century, between Russia and Turkey, they had 12 wars, and some of them involved the Romanians or the Romanian territories. Most of them involved the Black Sea. That's my first conclusion. In my opinion, the key of the politics and geopolitics of the Black Sea is this relation between Turkey, which for the moment it's a country allied with the United States, with Romania and so on. It's a NATO country. Turkey and Russia, their relation, it's something really pivotal for the Black Sea wider region. And I will try to explain, for instance, in our history, the first ruler who really had the, let's say...
In your opinion, the greatest challenges and threats in the Black Sea after the war started in Ukraine, even though the fighting is not so far from Romania, many of us have the feeling that nothing can happen to our country thanks to our NATO allies and to our American friends, their military presence here. Please tell us what we are relying on when we are feeling secure a couple hundred kilometers from the war.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much, Ambassador Zuckerman. Thank you very much, Mr. Salameh, for your disponibility to host this such important event. Yes, you are very right, Sabin, that indeed Romania is very close to the biggest threats for Europe's security. And I think that Romania is playing one of the most important role in our 30 decades of history, because Romania is a hub for support of Ukraine. Now we are playing the role, and I think the profile of Romania will be different in the next decade, because it's necessary to develop this strategic partnership with the United States, because the fight of Ukraine is not a fight between two countries, between the Russian Federation and Ukraine. It's a fight between autocracy and democracy. And I pretty believe that if we failed and Russia will win the war, first of all, the image of the United States will be serious damage, more than what's happened in Afghanistan, for instance. And secondly, I think that Romania could play an important role because you have, as you very well discussed in the first panel of our event, we have a lot of resources of energy in the Black Sea. And Romania could be, and I hope that in next period, especially because of this the gas perimeters in the Black Sea, you can play a very important role, including this process of reconstruction of Ukraine. We mentioned the developments made by Black Sea oil and gas, but also will develop in short time in 2027, we'll have in the first quarter the first molecule of gas from Neptune deep perimeters. Each year, Romania will have possibility to assure between 7 and 8 billion cubic meters of gas, will be the biggest provider in the EU to other countries. And it's very important for Romania because Romania could be a bridge for American companies, from Western companies to Ukraine, to be located here in Romania, to be under Article 5 umbrella, to have direct contact with energy resources, cheaper, and to have possibility to be part of reconstruction process of Ukraine.
Thank you. Mr. Breckbull, I want to start asking you, what was your role as a counselor of the Department of State? And also, what was the main goal of previous administration, Trump administrations, in terms of security in Europe and especially in the Black Sea? Please.
Well, thank you very much for including me. It's always great to be able to visit with some of my old friends in Romania and to have the opportunity to meet some new folks. Those of you that have had the chance to see my bio know that I have close ties to Europe and spent quite a bit of time during my time at the department working on the European front. To be very succinct, I would tell you that I think there really were two primary objectives on the part of President Trump and his foreign policy during our period of service. One was to ensure that the deterrence model, if you will, was tough and strong and working, because I think President Trump committed to the American people that we would not, spend and waste U.S. treasure and blood, a third time over the course of 100 years in Europe. And in order to do that, I think the second point was that he felt very strongly, and all of us worked hard to make sure that Europe was engaged in its own defense to a level that, frankly, since the end of the World War II, it had not been. I think it's worth spending a moment or two to just sort of highlight a little bit of where sort of that came from. But before I do that, you asked the first question there was really more about the role, and I'll just spend a second because a lot of people hear counselor and they assume that means in some way, shape, or form legal counsel. It couldn't be further from the truth. In this case, I am not a lawyer, never have been, never will be. But the counselor was actually a role that was set up at the State Department over 100 years ago with the intent of being the number 2 official, because the Secretary of State started to travel and people became convinced that they needed to have someone in Washington to serve as the number 2. Obviously, we eventually evolved our structure, and the counselor and established a deputy secretary of state, and the counselor became an undersecretary level position with an undefined portfolio. I happen to be a West Point classmate of Secretary Pompeo, and have known him obviously since our days at West Point. And so, based on a 40-year relationship, he asked me to come and help him, and frankly, my job became very focused on cleaning up trouble spots. And dealing with some of the tough issues. So let's talk for a second about sort of some of the bigger picture issues with regard to the situation that President Trump found himself in when he took over as president in early 2017. And I think there's a lot of consistency with sort of U.S. foreign policy in the previous 14 presidential administrations. These are, I would say, sort of 6 consistent tenets. The support of freedom and democracy worldwide, the rule of law, support of human rights, free markets, capitalism, entrepreneurship, and innovation. And I think during that period, it was really unquestioned that the U.S. would single-handedly guarantee Western Europe's freedom and prosperity. And it shouldn't fall on far from view that was all happening. Despite increasing European wealth and prosperity. The rise of China in the beginning of the Obama administration, really the 12th administration, the situation was a bit different. You had a U.S. Economy that was running huge deficits, a U.S. budget, I should say, a federal government. We were losing jobs, and the economy was under duress. We had lots of immigration challenges, et cetera. And President Trump really sort of decided to implement those tenets and support those tenets, but do it in a different way. And so I'd like to just highlight a couple things, and we can get into it in further detail in a minute. But he decided that he was going to put American people and American national security first, because he believed that a strong America was good for democracy and freedom on a worldwide basis. I think he thought and wanted us to deal with the world the way it was, in a realistic fashion, and not a way in which we wished it was. And he felt that we needed to implement policies to shape the world to be the way it wanted to be, as opposed to living with it the way it was. And as such, wanted to reestablish the deterrence model that President Reagan had so successfully used to help end the Cold War.
Mr. Bregbull, I want to ask you this specifically. I don't want to politicize this debate, but I want to ask you this specifically because I saw in the media that the support for Ukraine has a bipartisan support in Congress, so it doesn't matter. Almost every member of the Republican Party in the Congress are agreeing that the United States should help Ukraine right now. And also we saw some bipartisan initiatives to increase the military presence here in Romania. Maybe we'll speak with Mr. Scutaro about that in a minute. But I wanted to ask you, did you see there is a difference between the policy of the United States in terms of security in the Black Sea, in Europe, between the administrations? What is different now, and what do you think is wrong or is not going well?
Yeah, so, I think there obviously was no invasion of Ukraine during the previous administration. And I don't think that was an accident. We worked very hard to establish the deterrence model. And I suspect during this conversation, we will talk about energy policy and how it impacted that, because from our perspective, the two were incredibly interlinked. Our view was that a lot of the troublemakers have a tremendous amount of energy resources at their disposal. And our view was that we needed to ensure U.S. energy independence and be able to use that to keep energy prices low and therefore bad actors around the world unable to implement their policies. Deterrence starts at the front line. It doesn't start in the back. And so I think that's why you saw during the Trump administration, we worked aggressively in Eastern Europe to establish partnerships, a number of which we established with Romania, and to ensure that up and down the Eastern European flank, the resources were in place to make sure that the Russians knew that fundamentally we were serious about Article 5 and that deterrence and our partnership was something that we would not back down from.
Thank you. Mr. Scutaro, what exactly it changed in the last 10 years in terms of relationship between us and the United States? Because we have this, I think, more than 2 decades, this partnership, this strategic partnership. We enforce that with NATO allies, but also some special military operations with USA in Afghanistan and some other places. But then in the last years we have a law in Congress about which is specifically talking about Black Sea, and also we have this memorandum signed between our presidents, between Mr. Trump and Mr. Iohannis, about some mutual collaboration with nuclear power, energy, and communications and stuff like that, more than just a military cooperation. What is the significance of that?
By far, the most important domain is represented by military and intelligence. But I think that our partnership still has a lot of space for improvement, especially in the economic field. You mentioned nuclear domain, and you have this project for small nuclear reactors, and Romania will be the first country in the world will host this new American technology after the US. And I think that we have renewable, other domain, but at the same time it's necessary to have a long-term political commitment of the United States dedicated to the Black Sea region, not only to Romania. And it's great to have now this initiative assumed by Senator Shaheen from Democrat Party and Mitt Romney from Republican Party. We have 11 senators in the Senate who are co-sponsoring this initiative, and 5 representatives in the House. It would be great if you can have this bill passed in the Congress this year before to have elections in the United States. And the question is, why the Black Sea matters for the US? And I like maps, and I prepare a few maps for you. If it's possible to show the first one. And it's necessary to advocacy in the Congress and to present Americans why the Black Sea matters for the United States. And if you could put the first map on the screen, it would be great. This is the Black Sea. Black Sea, it's a corridor between Asia, between Central Asia and Europe. Black Sea means Middle East, North Africa, access to North Africa and Mediterranean Sea, access to Balkans, means grain, food security, and energy. And I want to show the next map because we discussed about food security. This green line represents the grain route from Odessa to Bosphorus to Turkish Straits. It is a route established in August last year by the United Nations together with Russian Federation, Ukraine, and Turkey. And using this route, Ukraine is exported more than 32 million tons of grain to entire world, especially North Africa and the Middle East. And we know, for instance, how important is Israel for the US security. And by the way, the Egypt is most important, very important for Israeli security. And Israel is assuring entire amount of grain from Black Sea countries, from Russian Federation, Ukraine, and Romania. For instance, from Romania is flowing 20% of grain necessary to Egypt. You have also a teeny spot near to this green line, Snake Island, a sensitive spot in the western basin of the Black Sea, because when the Russian Federation invaded Ukraine in the first day, they occupied Snake Island and they established a naval blockade between Snake Island and the Crimea. Each day at the time, Ukraine has lost $160 million per day, and Romania became the first route for Ukraine export. Even now, through Romania, Ukraine is exporting each day cereals and agriculture products, and Romania helped Ukraine to export more than 22 million tons of grains. Food security and energy also. I mentioned energy, and we have around 200 billion cubic meters on entire economic exclusive zone, and the most prolific perimeter, Neptune Deep, has 100 billion cubic meters. Just to understand better what means, for instance, 100 billion cubic meters, Republic of Moldova has an annual consumption of 1.5 billion, Bulgaria 2.6. Romania has capacity to cut this malign influence of Russian Federation, of Gazprom, as for a decade at minimum. And also will have capacity to not only to export, as you already discussed in the first panel, but also to provide to companies, to foreign companies, the energy necessary for the next step, next important step, the reconstruction process of Ukraine.
Thank you. Professor Ciorianu, do you think only the strong military presence here will solve the problem, or there is any room for diplomacy anymore in the Black Sea? Because you already mentioned the past wars in the Black Sea, the relation between Russia and Turkey. In the last 2 decades, Russia waged 2 wars in the Black Sea against Georgia and then against Ukraine. There is room for diplomacy, or is just about the war and waiting the end of it?
Fortunately, always there is a room for diplomacy. That's the reason I told you that I am really happy, as I told you, Sabine, that at least the Turkish president, Erdogan, tried to manage a kind of corridor, for instance, for the cereals, but not only cereals, a kind of corridor for a discussion between the Russians and the Ukrainians. Having all our, let's say, reticence regarding the political style of the Turkish president, who's, in my opinion, he's not a democrat in our understanding of the world, but the fact that he tried to establish a way of communication, for me, it's a very good sign of our times. So there is a room for diplomacy in every conflict, given the fact that the Black Sea, it's in a tremendous evolution since 1990. Just imagine that during the Cold War, the Black Sea was, let's imagine the Black Sea like a triangle. The Russians, the Soviet Union, they had 2 lines of the triangle, the west and the east, with Turkey, the NATO Turkey in the south. Today, NATO has 2 lines, the west, the northwest, starting probably from Ukraine in the future, until the south with Turkey, which is, as I said, Turkey, in my opinion, it's pivotal for our alliance. And the problem of Crimea, can we find a diplomatic solution for Crimea? Because for the moment, I can imagine only a military one, not a diplomatic one. Can we imagine that the Russians will renounce, will accept losing Crimea in the foreseeable future? Once again, I'm optimistic regarding the chances of diplomacy, but I'm afraid that some topics, as Crimea, for instance, will need a military solution.
But do you think there is because you were the Minister of Foreign Affairs and you know how these negotiations works, even in time of wars and behind the doors, with the closed doors. Do you think there is something that Russia in the next future will accept to get out from Ukraine and maybe Crimea and accepting some security warranties for Ukraine. Do you think Russia will accept a rational solution?
That's a problem. Let me tell you one personal story. In April 2008, I was the Minister of Foreign Affairs, and I had the chance to organize the NATO summit in Bucharest. I was present in all the discussion regarding the chances for Ukraine to join NATO. A larger part of our friends and partners, from the Chancellor Angela Merkel to President Sarkozy, the French President Sarkozy, Italy, all of them said, no, Ukraine is not a viable, for the moment, not a viable partner in order to join NATO. So they don't receive the MAP, Membership Action Plan. Ukraine or Georgia, they didn't receive the MAP. Russians, they knew that. In the last day of the summit, the Russian President Vladimir Putin, he announced that I'll arrive in Bucharest knowing that the Ukrainians will not be accepted in the alliance. So they knew from the very beginning in 2008 that Georgia and Ukraine, they didn't have a real chance to join the alliance. And last year, Sabine, do you remember? What was the official position of the Russian president? Ukraine, it's a menace because they will enter NATO. NATO, please rewrite your history back to 1997 and so on. So they know the truth, but their narrative, it's purely aggressive and should I say sometime brazen.
Thank you. Yeah, sure. I will get back to Mr.
You were in the government too, I think.
No,
at the moment.
I was National Security Advisor a few years later.
Yeah.
I will get back to Mr. Bregbol in a second, but I want Mr. Scutaro to continue this idea because it is about propaganda. The Russians knew, they just presented the other way, and we are not in a direct war with Russia, we, Romania, and the United States. But there is a, there is a feeling that there is a Cold War still going around, and they are using everything to disrupt our democracy. In the United States, in the United Kingdom, in Romania, maybe. What is this kind of threat from Russia?
I think that we have this intellectual comfort to consider that we are not in the war with Russia, but they are considering that they are in the war with us. And they seem to be very poor on military domain up to now, but they are very good in hybrid domain. And they are using, first of all, disinformations. This is the reason why you have anti-Western, a liberal party in the second place now in Romania and our public opinion polls. We are in the war with Russia because they are trying to undermine the democracy in Romania, in other countries in Europe. They interfere in elections. And let's imagine that we'll have 11 elections in the EU area in the next period up to December 24, including elections for EU Parliament. And next year will be an electoral period for Romania with 4 elections. Will be a mess, by the way. But we discussed about Crimea. I think that Crimea is a red line for both countries. It's a red line for Zelensky and Ukraine because Crimea will represent a platform for the next attack to Crimea, even with Putin or other successor. Because I don't believe that the next after Putin will be, more democratic, And at the same time, this war for Ukraine is an existential war. They fight to survive. And President Putin mentioned very clear a few weeks ago in this meeting with bloggers, military bloggers, that objectives of the military operation remain the same. What means the same objective? To destroy Ukraine. And by the way, to destroy Ukraine is necessary to cut the Ukraine access to the Black Sea and to conquer the entire littoral of the Black Sea. This is for Romania, it's a nightmare to see Russia again on the Prut River, because I'm pretty sure if they will have possibility to create this land bridge between Crimea and Transnistria, they will occupy Republic of Moldova. They will not install a puppet regime in Chisinau, because we don't have more buffer zone. They occupy de facto Belarus. Now we have a full-scale warfare in Ukraine. They will not see Moldova like an experiment to have a buffer zone between West and East. They will occupy Republic of Moldova. And for Romania, this represents a nightmare in terms of security. For this reason, it's necessary to help Ukraine to resist, because it's necessary between Romania and Russian Federation to have a freedom and independent and democratic state Ukraine, despite all our bilateral problems. And by the way, you can see that if only now Romanians and Ukrainians are discovering each other. We are so close, but in the same time so far. And it's necessary to reestablish the partnership between Ukraine and Romania. And by the way, after the war, the US will have the closest friends here, Ukraine and Romania. And it's necessary to have this in mind, that this partnership with Ukraine will be so valuable for the United States in the same time.
Thank you. Mr. Breckbull, we mentioned in the first part of our debate a little bit about energy, the natural gas reserves in the Black Sea, and Romania being the second country in Europe in terms of proven reserves. Tell me a little bit about Nord Stream, you know, the project, controversial, but then it was this thinking with our European allies that if you have close relationship with Russia, they will give us gas, we will give them money, and we will keep it together, and they will be our friends forever. And it proves it was a very, very bad idea. We see this now. Every European country is committed, almost everyone is committed to cut the Russian gas and to find some other resources. Some of them are in Romania. Maybe we are not up to speed with exploiting these resources. What do you think about Nord Stream? What do you think about this dependence of Europe of the Russian gas in the last decades?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a very relevant topic and question. You know, one of the things that I think we were highly focused on, and probably because we have the benefit of distance, geographic, and in other ways, it was no surprise, you know, to those of us that served in the previous administration, that a stronger tie, you know, and dependence, if you will, or an overdependence on Russian gas would be bad for Europe, plain and simple. I know, you know, our team made numerous trips. I personally made 4 or 5 trips to Germany and discussed with Chancellor Merkel's security advisor, as well as Foreign Minister Maas's security advisor, the fact that bypassing Ukraine through the building of Nord Stream 2 and Western Europe becoming that much more dependent on Russian gas could only be a bad thing. And unfortunately, you know, given some of the ties with some of the foreign, you know, the former political leaders, our message just didn't make it through. And you know, we worked when we came into office. Nord Stream 2 was 90+% finished, and we frankly spent 4 years working hard to prevent the remaining 10% from coming into effect. I think now, in hindsight, Western Europe understands that it wasn't some evil plot on the part of the United States to try to sell more liquid natural gas, but it had everything to do with diversifying energy sources and ensuring that you don't become overly dependent on someone who, frankly, doesn't share your values, democracy, freedom, all the things that we hold dear in the West. The Russians just don't share with us. And so to become overly dependent on them just made no sense to those of us looking at it from across the Atlantic. And hence, we were very aggressive in building alternative sources and capabilities and starting the conversation about Europe building more liquefied natural gas terminals to receive that and focusing away from both Middle Eastern as well as Russian energy sources. Those are not dependable. And anytime we allow ourselves and our future to be held in the hands of folks who don't share our values, we shouldn't expect good things to happen.
Do you think our collaboration between Romania and the United States will go on? We have some space to improve our relationship, like Mr. Scutaro said. Do you think no matter who is at the White House or who has the majority in Congress, this relationship will go on? Or do you think it depends on who wins the election in the United States?
No, I think regardless of who controls the House, regardless of who controls the White House, when folks actually have an opportunity to, they're in power, they're ruling. You look at things realistically, and you realize that Eastern Europe is absolutely critical. Especially, we haven't talked at all about the rise of China and Chinese interests. But I think anyone who looks at this in a sober fashion realizes that Europe and the United States or North America have got to work together, support each other to have the critical scale. When you look at all sort of future technologies and developments, they're all predicated on scale. When you add the United States economy and population to the European collective economy and populations, you have scale that is sufficient to compete and make the investments necessary to continue moving forward. And when I say to compete effectively with the Asian economic juggernaut, et cetera. So I think that there's lots of opportunity, and frankly, it's a real need for Eastern Europe, the United States, and frankly, we need to get Western Europe fully engaged as well. My sense from the vantage point I have here in the States is that Eastern Europe understands the absolute criticality of reestablishing deterrence. Frankly, remains to be seen whether Western Europe has. I know there's been some significant sacrifice, post the Ukrainian invasion. But at the end of the day, it's still the U.S. that bears by far the largest burden with supporting Ukraine. And I believe strongly that Western Europe has got to wake up and realize that it's not a matter of whether they'd like to or not. It's existential, and they've got to invest more heavily.
Thank you, Mr. Breckbull. I want to go back to Professor Cioreanu first. I was thinking about that before our debate because we both read a story about China saying again to Russia, don't use the nuclear weapon. So this is a red line. But I was thinking about that, Professor, that we are living in a paradoxical world. 30 years ago, when the Iron Curtain fell down, we were thinking, not only us, even great American thinkers, that we will have is the end of tyranny and we will have a peaceful world. But then I was thinking that maybe half of the countries in the world are not a democracy. They are autocracy, or however you define it, Mr. Scutaro defined it. Some of them have great resources. They are using it as a weapon, like Russia did with Europe, with the natural gas. It seems more complicated than we think 30 years ago. What do you think is how we navigate around this issue?
Yeah, you're right. You're right. In fact, I will be very honest with you, and I'll say that I was one of those guys who believed that Francis Fukuyama is right about speaking about the end of history. I really believed what the German rock band Scorpions sung about the wind of change in Russia. I believed that Russia will become, let's say, a country like us, a kind of, let's say, premature democracy. I believed that. In 2008, our political elite, including the president and the prime minister, including the former minister of foreign affairs, we believed that Dmitry Medvedev will represent a more liberal Russian president, a more liberal one. And I'm afraid that American President Barack Obama believed that too at that moment. So, on one hand, Russia, it's always, as Churchill said, an enigma, wrapped in a riddle and so on. On the other hand, history shows us that Russia had a kind of spiral evolution after an autocrat. Sometimes a more liberal ruler can be expected from, I don't know, from the history of the Tsars until now. They had their nightmare, as Giorgio Scutaro just said, our nightmare is the problem of Russia gaining Republic of Moldova, but the Russians too, they had a kind of nightmare if Ukraine, Poland, and Romania will be fully integrated in the Western world. That's the reason I, like probably you, Sabine Orkan, I have some, let's say, question mark regarding our failures in order to gain the Schengen space. Probably, including the Russians, probably they are involved in that affair. But anyhow, that's the problem. That's my answer to your question. The problem with Russia is they are not predictable. That's the fragility of the democratic world. In theory, all our democracies are more or less predictable. Russia is not predictable. We really don't know what will happen after Putin. Everything can... Every type of the
we'll hope for the best, prepare for the worst. Giorgio Scutaro,
I remember this picture with Madam Hillary Clinton and Mr. Lavrov one day reset, the press the button of the relationship of the relation between the Russian Federation and the US. And now we discovered that Medvedev is one of the strongest representative of militaristic Russia, okay? It's so far from that picture with so democrat guy with good English and his discussions with Americans at the time. We feed the beast with our goodwill and money starting with 2008. We missed the opportunity to counter Russia and to have a real deterrence. We had different approaches regarding the Baltic areas, in the Black Sea. We moved troops in the Baltic areas. Even Russia has acted kinetically only in the Black Sea, attacked Georgia in 2008, and after annexed Crimea in 2014. We missed this opportunity after the annexation of Crimea to be really independent in terms of energy in the Europe. We believe that our money and for cheaper gas from the Russia will transform Putin into a more predictable ruler. And now we see the problem of German economy because the German economic philosophy is based on cheaper gas from Russia. And because it's important to see where is Romania in this very difficult and global picture. And if you can put this third map on the screen, and to explain why it's important to support in Ukraine and to see the victory. The
Next one.
The next one. Look, one of the specificity of the Black Sea is the lack of international waters. We have only economic exclusive zones. And you can see on the left, the economic exclusive zone before the annexation of Crimea and after the annexation of Crimea. Of course, de facto, we are not recognizing the annexation, but de jure not recognizing the annexation, but de facto, our neighbor now on economic exclusive zone is the Russian Federation. And our objective is necessary to see the previous picture, to see that our economic zone is near to Ukrainian economic exclusive zone, and to avoid the Russian hybrid activities. And I show you the next pictures. Red perimeters represent all perimeters blocked by Russians in 2019 with military exercises, with NEP exercises. It's a legal practice, but they organize a lot of exercises, block the freedom of navigation in the Black Sea. And on the right, you can see 5 perimeters blocked by Russians between July and August 2019. They block 1/4 of the entire surface of the Black Sea. And below you can see the perimeters with gas reserve, Black Sea oil and gas, OMV Rom gas. You can see perimeter Sakarya, very important for Turkey. And also you can see that a part of these red perimeters already cover our economic exclusive zone. It's important to be prepared for the next period when Romania will start to build up our strategic infrastructure in the Black Sea, and to be aware that Russia is very possible to come to harass us and to try to postpone our process to build up strategic infrastructure. And on the right, we have, I mentioned on the map, Zatoka Bridge. This is a very important bridge, it's a railway bridge between Odessa and the Romanian ports on the Danube. On the February 10th, Russians used for the first time a naval kamikaze drone, and they hit the bridge. They put on the social media the image and a video with this fact, just to show the muscle. It's important to have in mind also this possible activities under false flag, because drones have a very low footprint on radar, and it's necessary to be prepared. Also, please take into account that the straits are closed by Turks because of Montreux Convention. We don't have now any American vessel in the Black Sea. We can count only on our own naval capabilities, and unfortunately, we have a very less capabilities, we Bulgarians. We have to face to the risk of mines. We destroy, I mean, Ukrainians, Romanian, Bulgarians, Turks, and even Georgians, more than 80 mines. And it's a very crowded space. I mentioned the importance of Romania for the Ukrainian export. And each day you have in front of Sulina port, in front of Constanța, and around 120, 150 ships.
Ukrainian ships?
No, from other countries, because they are waiting to be loaded with Ukrainian grain for the Ukrainian export. And for this reason, it's important to see more Americans' assets on the shore, especially because 80% of our military contracts are signed with Americans. By far, we try to be more integrated with American troops, and it's necessary to move from the rotational presence to the permanent presence. In the same time, Romania is necessary to invest more in these capabilities, for host nation capabilities, but in the same time, for the USA, it's important to be engaged for long term in the Black Sea. I understand that China is representing a biggest challenge than Russia, and probably it's difficult to have this strategic dilemma to play with two hot potatoes in the same time with Russia and China. But if the US will act like a fireman to solve a problem, and after 20 years to come in the same place to solve the same problem, it's a huge mistake, because Russians will come. I don't believe that even after Putin will have a democratic, as Professor Cioroianu mentioned, for Russians, Peter is great, or Catherine is great, not for their own reforms. They are great because they added territories to Russia. And Putin wants to be Vladimir the Great, not for reforms in Russia, but for the annexation of Crimea, for the annexation of Ukraine, for the annexation of Republic of Moldova. And please believe this behavior will remain. And especially we will see after this Prigozhin episode that Putin will be worse and worse in the relationship with Ukraine. With this war, we don't expect to see a peaceful solution in a few months, and it's necessary to be prepared for an attrition war and to be prepared for Russian intervention with hybrid instruments, in special disinformation, and they are using anti-Western parties, because the real danger for us is this war fatigue. If the West will decrease the level of support for Ukraine, finally Ukraine will lose this war, because even they are so brave, it's necessary to have ammunition, to have enough armament, and this ammunition and armament are coming for the West, for the United States in the first place. And it's necessary to understand that this is our fight, our common fight against autocracy.
Sabine, could I interject for a second there?
Yeah, sure.
And make
Go
a
ahead.
comment or two?
Yeah, please.
I mean, it comes back to the point I made at the beginning, that one of the differences, while I described the 6 tenets that President Trump's foreign policy shared with previous administrations, I mentioned that one of the commitments was that we needed to look at the world as it was, not as we wished it was. Because going back to why people perceived that Russia might be friendlier, et cetera, it's because what we all wanted to believe. Despite the fact that there were already signs then that in fact that wasn't the case, that the values were not yet broadly shared and had not dug in. And so the situation that we find right now, I think, in large part, is that deterrence. We sort of have realized that again, collectively, the West, that deterrence is important. It's sort of why the United States worked so hard to try to get all of Europe, not just a select number of European countries, to live up to the Wales Commitment, because fundamentally, we all don't want to think that China, has potential to cause mischief. But the fact of the matter is that that's wishful thinking as well. They have stated very clearly, and anyone who has studied sort of the Chinese leadership and statements, et cetera, knows that they have a very specific timeline and set of goals. And right now, when you look at it, the United States is really the only country that has the resources and ability to provide deterrence there in Asia, which makes it all the more important that Western Europe step up. Eastern Europe is stepping up. Western Europe needs to step up. And it's interesting because as I listened to the conversation, I realized that everyone else is talking about Europe as if it were one and the same. And I realized the European Union, what have you. But from the American standpoint, my seat here in the States, Europe is different. There are 2 Europes. There's Eastern Europe and there's Western Europe. And Europe has got to get on the same sheet of music, and they've got to realize that fundamentally, European security is something that everyone has to participate in. whether your border is directly bordering Russia, such as, we talked about the economic exclusive zones now, and how the Romanian EEZ borders, the de facto Russian one, or whether you're back in the UK or France, and you're hundreds of kilometers away. Deterrence is not something that you flip a switch and it's there today. Deterrence needs to be built by everything that is said, everything that is done, and the investments made. And I think Eastern Europe has got to put a lot more pressure on Western Europe to fundamentally make the investments and live up to the commitments, the Wales commitments, and fundamentally, carry the weight.
Thank you, Mr. Bragbul. Professor Cioranu will have the final word. One Romanian president once famously said that the Black Sea is actually a Russian lake. It is or not, because I saw this map of that Mr. Scutaru showed us. It's kind of a Russian lake. They block all the movement in the Black Sea, and also we are constrained by this Montreal Treaty. So we don't have allies here. We don't have the ships that we need, Mr. Scutaru. That's real.
Yeah,
that is real. Even though we pledge, we are, I think, the first country that pledged 2% of the GDP for the army, for the defense. We don't have these ships yet. Probably we'll have it in the future. So it is a Russian lake after all, or not?
Not anymore, in my opinion. Even I was impressed by the maps that George Scutaru just showed us. And probably you will tell us how can be legal to have military exercises during a period, I suppose, during some weeks, or you said that it's legal to organize such a military. But anyhow, for the 18th century, the 19th century, even during the Cold War, indeed, Black Sea was a kind of Russian lake. Nowadays, the key are in Turkish hands, the straits, Dardanelles and Bosphorus, from the Aegean Sea to the Marmara Sea and to Black Sea during the Bosphorus. So this is our chance. And sincerely, in my opinion, I cannot be a prophet in my own country, but I think Romania will be, in a way, pressed by our partners in order to reorganize our naval force. In a couple of decades, I think Romania will be forced to represent something important in the NATO naval capabilities on the Black Sea. If not, we'll be at the mercy of the Russians, military speaking. Even it's true that the nature of the war changed a little bit, given the fact that the flagship Moscow was attacked by some drones, I suppose, or anyhow, a kind of missile, and the flagship of the Russian fleet was destroyed, fortunately, in the very first 2 months of the war, I think. Anyhow, in last year, springtime. So the nature of the war, it's natural, it's changing, but in the same time, I'll close my remarks saying that we are naturally and logically obliged to be partners with Ukraine, with Poland. Their fate, it's our fate. History shows us that the fate of Poland was the fate of Romania and vice versa. That's the reason I began with Stefan the Great. His efforts in order to conquer Chilia and Cetatea Albă, the White Citadel. Chilia and the White Citadel today are on the Ukrainian territory. in the northwest of the Black Sea. Those fortress for what Stephen the Great fought the middle of the 15th century. So 500 years ago, Stephen was probably one of the first European leaders who understood that the Turks, the Ottoman Empire, was advancing from the south to the north. Nowadays, Russia, are they on the are they advancing anymore? I don't think so. That's the reason I think, knowing the president that you mentioned, President Basescu, the Black Sea is not anymore a Russian lake. And once again, fortunately, the keys and the straits are in the Turkish hands. At least for the moment, Turkey is one of our friends and partners.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Bregbull. I understand it's a late hour with you. We are pleased that you were able to talk with us. Thank you, Mr.
It was a pleasure.
Cioroianu, Mr. Scutaru.
Thank you very much.
I was ready to just say thank you all, but then I remember a story, a great story, from one of the books of Mr. Professor Cioroianu. You know that we were able to unite Romania after the First World War, thanks to an American president, Woodrow Wilson. And I read that because the Prime Minister couldn't negotiate with him, he called Regina Maria, and she went to the Paris press conference, and I read about how she convinced Woodrow Wilson to help Romania be a bigger country. And someone said, because she didn't speak about the past of Romania, she spoke about the future of Romania.
Yeah.
And she said, if Romania is not strong and big, the Bolsheviks could come here. If it's big and strong, you could come here and you will have a great ally. And I was thinking about that because it's very important for our discussion. And I think the future is great for our countries. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.